In 1847, Mormon settlers in Nauvoo, Illinois fled religious persecution, crossing the Mississippi River in an attempt to escape mob violence. These pioneers had started a long, perilous trek westward to a land they soon called Zion. Many of those pioneers were under-equipped to handle the harsh, untamed wilderness, and as a result, many perished along their journey. Surrounded by the harsh environment and the imminent threat of death, many grew restless and worried. These people needed a leader, and at that time, one young man rose to the calling. Brigham Young was born in 1801 in Vermont and later moved to New York, where he spent most of his childhood. He attended a very little school and was roughly educated by his mother, Nabby Howe Young. In 1832, after many months of studying different religions, he became a devout member of a new church established by Joseph Smith known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The years after Brigham Young joined the Mormon Church were difficult ones for its members. The first congregation was held in New York, but social pressure led them to move west to Kirtland, Ohio, and later to Jackson County, Missouri. However, it soon became clear that the residents of Missouri had no intention of welcoming the church's members, as they were afraid of having a Mormon-run government, and also of the large Mormon population. The heat of opposition accumulated in the extermination order signed by Governor Boggs. He was critical of the Mormon settlers and was sympathetic to the mobs who disdained them. Boggs wrote in the document that the Mormons must be treated as enemies and must be exterminated or driven from the state if necessary for the public good. The document forced Mormons to make their trek back east, where they eventually made their home in Nauvoo, Illinois, a swampy town on the banks of the Mississippi. In Nauvoo, angry mobs had captured Joseph Smith and held him in Carthage jail, and the growing fear of the LDS Church led to the destruction of the jail and the murder of Joseph and his brother Hiram. Right then, the Saints were left without a leader and with the threat of only more violence. In response to this event, Brigham Young was unanimously voted in as the president of the LDS Church, and just 1 year later, the mobs burned down the religious temple in Nauvoo, forcing the Saints to start a large trek westward. Understandably, leading hundreds of people across 1,500 miles of untamed wilderness was extremely difficult. Yet this was just the beginning of the tests that Brigham Young would face as a leader of the Mormon trek.
The trek began in Nauvoo and ended up in the Salt Lake Valley of Utah, where the Mormons created a thriving settlement. Brigham Young warned the Saints of the difficulty of the journey, but encouraged them to make the trip. Before the Mormons started the long trek west, Brigham Young and other leaders organized the plans for the migration in winter quarters, where the Saints waited out the winter for better traveling conditions. Young then organized the Vanguard Company to travel west and create trails. The migrants faced starvation, illness, exhaustion, freezing temperatures, and various other perils in the wilderness. The Vanguard Company reached the Salt Lake Valley in July of 1847. Brigham Young and some other members of the company traveled back to winter quarters to help other companies make the journey. On July 24, 1847, Brigham Young stopped the wagon train in the Salt Lake Valley, and then he called out his 4 famous words to the Saints. This is the place. They had finally found Zion. This land was considered a barren wasteland by most other travelers. Covered by dry earth and near a saltwater lake, the valley did not seem like an inhabitable place. The heat was intense, comparable to an Arizona desert today. Farming and herding seemed impossible, and since the town was not rich in gold, mining was hopeless. Many others would have given up and moved on to a more fertile place, such as Oregon. However, these Saints were determined to follow their leader. Despite the circumstances, the Saints began to establish their new home. Within a matter of months, Saints began to till the desert earth and farm what little they could. They invented new irrigation technologies to aid in this project. In addition, Brigham Young proposed that the Saints would begin construction on a new church temple in the center of the Salt Lake Valley. This announcement excited the settlers, and within a few years, ground was broken. On April 6, 1853, the cornerstone was laid for what would become known as the Salt Lake Temple. Brigham Young later engaged in discussion with the federal government about this new settled territory, which was now called Deseret. He proposed that this state would encompass much of modern-day Southwest and parts of the Pacific Northwest. While trying to reach a solution to this puzzle, the U.S. government and Young signed the Compromise of 1850, where the borders of Deseret were shrunk to a much smaller size. The new territory was named the Utah Territory, after the Ute Indian tribe. Later, due to fears over the growing Mormon Church, the federal government forced him to give up governorship to another, non-member politician. Soon, a productive town rose from the ashes of the desert they lived in. Brigham Young's beehive house, where he resided, became a symbol of hard work to the Mormons in the territory. Young was known for his hospitality, and was known to host many guests in this large residence, showing his ground-up approach to leadership among his people. Along with establishing a firm church and state in the Salt Lake Valley, Brigham Young also led a large colonization effort for the rest of the Western Territory. He sent church members on church-led missions to the states surrounding the Utah Territory. By handpicking leaders to head the colonization effort and filling the ranks with unemployed or idle men, Young was able to help settle a large portion of the West, including much of Arizona, Nevada, and California. While the Mormon pioneers had traveled this long distance to escape persecution, there was still heat coming from the east. President James Buchanan was growing sympathetic to anti-Mormon sentiments. He soon sent an army out from the east to keep an eye on the Saints. However, Brigham Young was able to keep peace between the two groups, and the army left the Salt Lake Valley on the same day they came. All the while, the economy under Young had expanded rapidly. In the 1860s, the Mormon communities in Utah all pitched in to complete the Transcontinental Railroad. This, along with the invention of the telegraph, boosted trade with the East and lifted the productivity of the Saints. The ongoing construction of the Salt Lake Temple was sped up dramatically. Brigham Young's idealized society separate from the persecution of the East was nearly fulfilled. However, he would never see it complete. In 1877, Brigham Young fell ill with an unknown and painful condition, and on August 29th of that year, he died. Despite the death of this powerful leader across the plains, the efforts he left on the world were momentous.
Brigham Young left behind a huge imprint on much of the western United States. In the 26 years that he was in Utah, he organized 100,000 people, founded over 200 cities, and established schools, factories, mills, and many other institutions designed to benefit the community. Settled in the relatively untamed Western territories, Brigham Young was able to develop social policy that benefited the culture of the settlers. Brigham Young was well known for his advocacy of women's voting rights. He was the instigator of a large rush westward to claim lands in Oregon, Arizona, California, and beyond. Arizona especially benefited from such expansion, as the Mormon settlers came up with new ways to interact with the Native Americans and to irrigate the dry soil. By taming the desert climates of Utah and Arizona, Brigham Young and the early saints brought about the era of safer westward expansion. And without his groundbreaking leadership in pioneering new irrigation technologies, Arizonan farming today would not be as developed. Shortly before Young's death, he founded Brigham Young Academy, the predecessor of the modern Brigham Young University, in order to provide educational opportunities to the settlers in Utah. Another long-lasting university, University of Utah, was created to foster competition and improve standards of education. Mormons today continue to celebrate the pioneer heritage that Brigham Young engendered. With such events as cultural celebrations and Pioneer Day parades, the members of the LDS Church continue to remember the trials and hardships that their forebears faced as they crossed the plains. They continually keep in remembrance the hard work their ancestors put into building up their Zion. Brigham Young's legacy extended far beyond just the LDS Church and the western United States. Many of the settlements that he established still exist across the United States. His story of guiding the distressed pioneers across the plains provided a monumental standard for leaders to follow. Contemporarily dubbed the American Moses, Young influenced and inspired many audiences across the world to act in accordance with their beliefs. This also extended into the modern-day realm of immigration. Brigham Young led groups of people away from persecution to find a new home where they could settle freely. Today, immigration from foreign countries is a widely discussed issue. Many immigrants struggle to achieve self-government, as the government restricts rights to oppositional groups. However, Brigham Young's establishment of the Utah settlement demonstrated that such rights can be found, no matter how heated the opposition is. Immigrants and migrants can have hope today because of the foundations Brigham Young laid for civil liberties. Brigham Young's leadership demonstrated how religion and politics can be compatible. He continually acted under faith in his God and his people. His oversight of the pioneers' trek west created not only a protected and thriving community for the Mormons, but also helped shape the United States we know today.